The year I went undercover, I took a bullet for the mob boss to prove my loyalty. I ended up losing my memory for 3 years. The day I woke up, I reached out my hand, and the guy quickly knelt down, putting his face close to mine. He whined, "Can you go a little easier today? I have a meeting later." I was totally dumbfounded, speechless. Jessica rubbed my hand. "There are a lot of people here. Let's do this when we get home, okay?" No way. Was this really the ruthless, decisive mob boss I knew? The last thing I remembered was him pointing a gun at my head, his eyes filled with disgust, saying, "Stay away from me." Back then, forget touching him, even a glance would earn me a death glare. Now, he was not only initiating but also acting super compliant. The craziest part was everyone else around us looked completely used to it. I was terrified and tried to pull my hand back. He held it tight, his eyes looking dangerous. "Babe, why won't you hit me? You're still into that pretty boy, aren't you? I'll send him to Africa to get a tan." Totally absurd. But Jimmy always keeps his word. I gritted my teeth, raised my other hand, and slapped him. It made a loud, crisp sound. He didn't even flinch. His handsome face instantly turned red on one side. My hand was shaking. I was scared he'd pull out the gun from his waistband and shoot me on the spot. But then, he rubbed his face, his lips moving. That really hurt. What was I supposed to do? "You told me to hit you. Was I supposed to kiss it better now?" Just as I thought that, Jimmy knelt down, pressed his face into my palm, and rubbed it. "Babe, kiss it better." Oh my God. Just end me. 3 years ago, I was sent undercover. But it was a rough start. I couldn't even get close to Jimmy's inner circle. He always had a bunch of bodyguards with him. So, I disguised myself and got a job at a bar he owned. The day I finally staked him out, I got overzealous and insisted on performing a trick, opening a beer bottle with my bare hands. The bottle cap hit Jimmy right on the nose. Beer sprayed everywhere, drenching his custom-made suit. That night, I learned what an intimidating glare truly was. As a result, I was punished by being assigned to guard the restroom door. I was on restroom duty for a whole month. Then, I caught sight of Jimmy at the bar again. This time, he was there for a business deal. My superiors had told me he was involved in some shady business lately and instructed me to keep a close eye on him. I begged the manager. She gave me a look that said it all, "Even though you're good looking and have a nice figure," but, she closed her eyes and gritted her teeth, "The boss isn't into guys." Oh, I forgot. I always had short hair, and when I applied, I found out the pretty girls all needed long hair. So, I just bluffed and said I was a guy. I stomped my foot, quickly saying, "What if he actually likes guys? Look, he comes here and never touches any of the women. He's always by himself." The manager's face lit up with understanding. I had convinced her. She found me a sheer outfit. I waved my hands. No way. My chest was too big, it would be obvious. I'd heard that these rich, powerful people often had special fetishes. I asked for a school uniform. I didn't wear any makeup, just strawberry-flavored lip balm. When I pushed the door open, everyone inside put their drinks down. A kind older man warned, "Kid, you've got the wrong room, haven't you?" I looked at Jimmy, who had a detached expression, and timidly called out, "Brother." He frowned, "You've got the wrong person." I ran over, not watching my step, and tripped on an empty bottle. I did a perfect slide kneel. My face nearly hit little Jimmy. So embarrassing. He poked my forehead with his finger. "Where are you even looking?" I looked up and massaged his legs. "Brother, please take me in." Tears instantly welled up. "My dad gambles, he lost all our money, my mom is seriously ill, and my little sister is starving." Jimmy played with his lighter, his face unmoved. "I've heard that story at least 10 times. So what? This time, I wasn't leaving no matter what. I was going to get back everything I'd lost. One of his subordinates came in. "Boss, Mr. Smith is here." My internal alarm bells went off. My superiors told me to pay special attention to him. Jimmy's expression tightened slightly, and he got up, walking around me. Get out. I wouldn't. Then promised to take me in. His eyes were dark and deep, staring at me. Are you an adult? I nodded. He looked away and scoffed. Too bad, I don't like adults. He really was a pervert. Just as I was about to say something else, Mr. Smith walked in, his eyes playfully darting between me and Jimmy. So, Jimmy likes this kind of thing, huh? You should have said something earlier. I have plenty. Jimmy pulled out his gun and pressed it against my forehead, his eyes icy. Stay away from me. I was lurking by the door, constantly observing what was happening inside. Suddenly, there was a commotion. I followed Jimmy's subordinates and burst in. I saw Mr. Smith clutching his bleeding forehead, pointing a gun at Jimmy. Die. Just as he was about to pull the trigger, in that moment, I didn't think much. I just didn't want Jimmy to die that easily. I ran incredibly fast. The moment I tackled him, the gun fired. In my last conscious moments, I heard Jimmy's furious voice. Are you an idiot? If I hadn't pushed him away, that bullet would have definitely hit his head. Luckily, I was alive, but I had amnesia. My personality changed completely after I lost my memory. According to bystanders, a total flirt. She'd hug Jimmy and demand kisses at the drop of a hat. She'd barge into the bathroom while he was showering and measure him. Even crazier, she insisted on sleeping with her head on his abs every night. A social butterfly. She'd tell everyone she was Jimmy's ancestor. She'd hug Jimmy and call him hubby no matter where they were. She'd always stir up trouble, relying on his indulgence. Extremely violent. She'd slap Jimmy all the time. When she got really out of hand, she'd even use restraints. Jimmy's villa basement was filled with all the tools I'd prepared for him. I slammed my hand on the table. Nonsense. Billy flinched. Ma'am, you really were like that. He was Jimmy's personal bodyguard, assigned to me. He didn't have many flaws, except for his stutter. I actually knew what I had done during those amnesia years. But I just couldn't accept it. I tried to convince myself it was all a dream. I quietly asked Billy, did Jimmy ever resist when I hit him? Billy picked at his fingers. He recalled that every time his boss got hit by his wife, he wouldn't get mad. Instead, he'd act like a timid little wife, rubbing her hand and asking if she wanted to do it again. Resist? No way, how else would my 10 fingers still be here? Anyway, it didn't do any good, you just hit harder. Billy finished the second half of his sentence, looking at me nervously. Boss said only those with wives get hit. We don't have wives, so no one hits us. So pathetic. I fell silent. Now that my memory was back, I was worried about my mission progress. I contacted my superior. My superior first texted back with a question mark. Weren't you dead? Me, are you cursing me? I'll report you. Superior, oh, is my little darling bubbling with anger? Want me to smash your baby bottle? Me, did I offend you? Why are you swearing so much? My superior continued to be sarcastic. No way, you're Jimmy's little darling. I couldn't reach you anywhere back then, I thought you'd been kidnapped. I finally found you on the street and tried to take you away, but I treated my superior like a kidnapper. I remembered now. I remembered everything. He got more and more agitated. You even called me an old geezer. Ugly and unfashionable. Not even worth one of your dear Jimmy's fingers. I was so mad I couldn't eat for 3 days. How am I ugly? I'm a flower in the bureau. My bad, I apologize. Later, we got to serious matters. My superior said everything had been investigated, and Mr. Smith had been arrested. As for Jimmy, he was commended as an outstanding citizen for cooperating with the police. They'd thoroughly investigated him and found nothing out of line. It was just that during my amnesia, Jimmy kept a tight leash on me, and they didn't dare to tip him off. Most importantly, I also couldn't leave Jimmy. I was so demanding. They had headaches too, so they just let me stay with Jimmy. As for now, I needed to find a plausible reason to leave on my own. Before hanging up, my superior gloated, "I think he's genuinely into you, letting you hit and scold him. If you just up and leave, who knows, hee." "What are you hee-hee-ing about, you old geezer?" While I was racking my brain, Jimmy's assistant called, "Ma'am, you didn't check in today, did you?" "Me, check in for what?" He sighed, "No wonder." Then he pleaded with me, "Ma'am, please come and calm the boss down, he's about to blow up the company." "All right, I'm on my way." I didn't know the way, so I had Billy drive. He was on the verge of tears. I thought he was too excited, so I patted his shoulder. "From now on, you'll be my most trusted person, work hard." "No, ma'am," I wanted to say, "I've failed my driving test, 5 times. Useless." I made him my human GPS. Half an hour later, I deeply regretted that decision. We came to a crossroads. I asked Billy which way to go. He rolled down the window, almost sticking his head out. Stray. Go straight, right?" "Got it." I even sped up a bit. Billy's face turned red from holding it in, directly right. I should just ditch him. We drove for a short while, and then there was a fork in the road. Billy excitedly pointed at the bridge, up. I turned the wheel and drove onto the bridge. His face was full of regret, and he clapped his knees, almost jumping up. "I came this way last time. It was jammed for a whole day." "You've got to be kidding me." Thanks to Billy, it was already evening by the time we reached Jimmy's company. Jimmy's assistant was truly professional. The security guard said he'd been waiting by the roadside since the afternoon. "Sorry about that, traffic was bad." He gave a mysterious smile. "No problem, a little wait is nothing." Then he walked ahead to lead the way. His steps were uneven. "Assistant Miller, what's wrong with your leg?" Billy quickly answered, "It must be paw paralyzed." Assistant Miller sternly reminded him, "Don't curse in front of the madam." It wasn't until I arrived that it dawned on me. What was I supposed to do here? Assistant Miller smiled, "Ma'am, please don't hold back, do as you please." He meant something by that. When I got to the CEO's office, I understood. Jimmy was being pestered by a woman. "Didn't she just take a bullet for you back then?" "I know you're being so patient with her out of gratitude, but Jimmy, you've done enough. Everything she's done these past few years has been a joke, you know? Do you know what people outside are saying about you?" Jimmy was slumped in his chair, leaning back, hand propping up his chin, his eyes fixed on his phone on the table. He replied dismissively, "What are they saying?" The woman scoffed, "They're saying you're whipped, spineless, getting hit by a woman every day, totally disgraced." I was eavesdropping outside the door, guiltily wiping sweat from my brow. Jimmy's mind wasn't on it. "Oh. They're just jealous." The woman was shocked. Then, her eyes turned red with tears as she asked him, "You think she's so important, but what about me? What am I to you?" I remembered who she was. She was the daughter of one of Jimmy's loyal subordinates, Cathy. I heard that subordinate saved his life years ago but died in the process. Jimmy, out of gratitude, had raised Sarah like his own sister. No wonder. Before, I'd seen what happened to other women who pestered him. They all ended up so scared they'd take a detour whenever they saw him. Jimmy barely looked up. "You're overthinking it. You're not even on my radar." Cathy was unconvinced and cried, "If I had been there that day, I would have taken a bullet for you too." "What's so great about her?" I tossed in a button. "Wow, a cockroach." Cathy shrieked and hid behind Jimmy. After realizing she'd been tricked, she was furious and argued, "That doesn't count. Jessica, you cheated." "Babe." Jimmy's eyes lit up, and he walked over. "You finally came to pick me up from work." Honestly, I was still scared of him. I subconsciously stepped back. He froze, looking a bit confused. His eyes were full of hurt. Cathy still wouldn't give up and stuck close to him. Jessica, you don't love Jimmy at all. You just use him as a punching bag, you don't even give him basic respect. Frankly, you're either after his looks or his money, you wicked woman. Damn it. I couldn't argue. I felt like she was right. Jimmy's face turned terrifyingly cold. Get out. All right. I'd better make myself scarce. Perfect, I wouldn't have to struggle to find an excuse to leave him. Just as I turned around, he grabbed my wrist. He said, I was telling her to get out. Cathy was stunned. Billy and Assistant Miller were quick on the uptake. They stepped forward, one on each side, and escorted her out. Do you understand, first come, first served? Why are you cutting in line? The door closed. It was soundproof, I couldn't hear anything from outside. I felt a little lost. I was wondering how to break the awkward silence. Babe. Huh? Jimmy leaned in and loosely hugged me, not daring to use force. I haven't seen you in so long, I missed you so much. Didn't we just see each other this morning? His left cheek was still swollen. I didn't dare move. He rubbed his face against my ear. Why didn't you hit me today? I didn't say anything, just tried to control my shaking hand. Strange. It was like muscle memory. Whenever Jimmy's face got close, my hands would itch. I chuckled a few times. After hearing what Cathy said, I reflected and realized I shouldn't trample on your dignity like that. So, I decided to break this habit of hitting people. Jimmy immediately let go of me. He took a deep breath and pulled out his gun. I trembled as I asked him what he was going to do. He brushed past me and walked out, gritting his teeth as he said, I'm going to kill Cathy. Of course, he didn't get his way. Because at the critical moment, I slapped him hard across the face. The force of it made my hands sting. He wiped the blood from the corner of his lips, his eyes subtly gleaming with excitement. More. Baby. I couldn't. I'm not a pervert. I held up my hand. I can't do it anymore. My hand really hurts this time. When we got home, Jimmy expertly found the first aid kit. He held me on his lap. He was both distressed and self-reproaching. You can use tools next time. I couldn't hold it in anymore. Jimmy, why do you like it so much when I hit you? He lowered his head and applied medicine to my hand. He curled his lips slightly. Because it's you. Whatever you do to me, I like it. He seemed beyond saving. Could I really interpret it that way? But I still wanted to try and help him. Cathy said you treat me like this because I saved you back then, but there are many ways to repay a kindness. You don't have to use your own body to. My voice trailed off, too embarrassed to continue. The next second, he knelt between my legs. His movements were fluid and quick, clearly well practiced. Babe, you're acting really weird today. I couldn't guarantee what Jimmy's reaction would be if I told him I'd recovered my memory. I had to play it cool and observe his response first. I quickly made an excuse. I'm a little tired of it. Are you tired of me? Jimmy was tall, and even kneeling, his gaze was level with mine. His eyes shimmered with tears. It was as if I nodded in agreement, those tears would instantly fall. Suddenly, a sense of guilt welled up inside me. It felt like I was abandoning a good man. No, I'm not. He didn't believe me. Yes, you are tired of me. I raised my hand to swear. No, really. You're so good looking, so rich, and your body is great. How could I ever get tired of you? He was angry. Then you didn't even kiss me today. I fell silent, not knowing what to say. Jimmy's eyes were teary, his voice choked, and he extended both hands. I want a kiss, I want a hug. He could actually act cute. I really am something else. I'd trained a stone-cold mob boss into a weak, easy-to-bully crybaby. It'd be a shame if I didn't become a dog trainer. I deliberately kept a cold face, unmoved. Just like he used to be with me. Then, tears streamed from the corners of Jimmy's eyes like broken pearls. He looked so pitiful. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes passed, and the tears still didn't stop. I gave in. First thing in the morning, diligent Jimmy was already on time for work. Just half an hour after he left, my phone started buzzing with messages from him. "Babe, are you still going to hit me today? If not, I'm off to make money then. The clothes are washed, dinner's warming in the kitchen, I'll pick up the kid after work." Don't misunderstand, the kid he mentioned was a stray dog I adopted. Name Godzilla. He was recently sent to dog training school. Jimmy was like a good dog who, even after I slapped him, would still lean in and lick my hand. I lay in the backyard, sunbathing, looking utterly resigned. Billy tiptoed over. "Ma'am, is your lip swollen from a mosquito bite?" I covered my mouth and glared at him. Why wasn't he stuttering now? It was all Jimmy's fault. Last night, he cried and begged for it. When I refused, he threatened to kill Cathy at the drop of a hat. One kiss wasn't enough. From the living room on the first floor, we kissed all the way up to the 5th, and I wasn't allowed to take the elevator. Midway, I just casually complimented him. "Who taught you to kiss so well?" He exerted a little more force, pressing closer to me. His eyes were burning. "You trained me, babe." I actually had such an impressive side to me. The main event was in the second half. As soon as he took off his shirt, I was half awake. I tenderly touched the large and small scars on his arms. Who did this? So cruel. There were whip marks. Burn marks from cigarette butts. And even marks from being tied too tightly with ropes. What brutal methods. I nervously touched him all over, afraid of missing any spot. Tears streamed down my face. He said, without a trace of emotion, "You." Because of that sentence, I felt guilty all night. I didn't dare to say I was tired. I even wiped his sweat. "How about we take a break?" Who knew that sentence would trigger something in him? Jimmy fought until dawn. Everything in the cabinet was used up. I was fine, my previous training was 100 times tougher than this. I was just a little weak in the legs, a little sore in the waist, and a little sleepier. Jimmy was different. He got out of bed holding his waist, each step more difficult than the last. After a few steps, he couldn't help but turn back. "I'm working overtime tonight, don't wait up for me. And tomorrow too." So diligent. I asked Billy, honestly, "How does your boss treat me?" Billy immediately straightened up and replied seriously, "He treats you exceptionally well." How so? When it came to this, he suddenly stopped stuttering. "Back then, you were in the hospital for 3 days, and the hospital issued 3 critical condition notices. The boss said he'd spend any amount of money to save you. He hired many doctors from abroad to operate on you and stayed by the operating room door the whole time. Later, when you woke up, you didn't remember anyone but him. The first moment you saw him, you called him hubby. That long and hazy memory began to flood back. When I first woke up, I was wary of everyone. I wouldn't let nurses apply medicine, and I wouldn't eat anything anyone brought me. But for some reason, I only trusted Jimmy. He canceled all his work. "Jessica, be good." I was so demanding back then. Spoiled rotten, I insisted he call me babe before I'd cooperate. If he didn't, I'd cry and say he didn't love me anymore. Thinking back, Jimmy probably wanted to strangle me. Love? What love? We'd barely even met a few times. Later, I truly acted like his wife. I demanded he report his schedule daily. If he came home late, I'd punish him by not letting him sleep in the room. I'd just reach out and take all his bank cards, calling it managing the household. Jimmy probably was truly scared of my demanding ways. He was incredibly cooperative. His friend warned him, "She just likes your money, be careful you don't get scammed." He didn't bat an eye, repeating the words I'd brainwashed him with the night before. "She likes money, and I happen to have money, so how is that a scam?" After saying that, he added his own line. He glared at his friend with disdain. "I think you just don't have a wife, and you're jealous." Those were all dark moments. I covered my face, wishing I could slap my past self to death. "Ma'am, please be a little nicer to the boss, he's so pitiful." Billy wiped away tears, heartbroken. Every year-end, when everyone's drinking and talking about their monthly allowance, the boss is always the most silent one. Meaning, Jimmy, who was worth billions, couldn't even pull out a few bucks from his pocket. That was enough. I genuinely felt bad for him. I let out a breath. "I've made up my mind." "Billy, have you decided to give the boss a raise in his allowance?" So materialistic. "No, I've decided to end this relationship with Jimmy." Billy knelt down and hugged my legs, wailing, "Mama, ma'am. Don't leave. My boss has no dad and no mom. If he loses his wife too, he'll cry himself to death." Indeed, a boss gets the subordinates he deserves. He knelt so smoothly. I gave him a look of concern for the mentally challenged. "It's a shame you're just a bodyguard. He'd be better suited for crying at funerals." "Why Billy? He should be called loudspeaker." After I left, Billy hid in the corner and called Jimmy. "Boss, ma'am wants to get ma, damn it." He was stuttering at the worst possible moment. On the other end of the phone, Jimmy stopped reviewing the contract, his voice filled with barely concealed shock. "Married?" "Billy, yes." No." Jimmy had already hung up. The hand holding the phone was shaking. He thought, it must be because he performed too well last night. He was awesome. Assistant Miller came in with a contract that needed signing. "Jimmy, do you have a moment?" Jimmy sat upright, his expression cautious and serious. "Probably not. I'm getting married. To be precise, I'm about to be proposed to." Assistant Miller's mouth was wide enough to swallow an entire egg. He couldn't help but shed a tear of sympathy for him. His boss had suffered for so long, and now he was finally getting promoted to a permanent position. For the rest of the day, everyone in the company was going to know that the madam was finally willing to go public with the boss. "Jimmy, you spilled your coffee." "It's fine. By the way, were you nervous when you got married?" "Jimmy, here's the proposal you wanted." "No rush. May I ask, did you cry when you got married?" Next one, he was very cautious and didn't speak first. He just happened to be in the same elevator as the boss. The boss's expression was serious, as if he was contemplating a very important decision. In that moment, he felt an overwhelming sense of reverence. Then, just as he was about to get off, he was called back. The boss very seriously asked, "Tell me, when I kneel, should I kneel on my left knee or my right knee?" I had no idea what was going on at the company. According to Billy, I used to be incredibly possessive of Jimmy. If I didn't see him for an hour, I'd throw a fit. So, I decided to push my luck. No man could tolerate a woman who was such a drama queen forever. Sooner or later, he'd be the one to break up with me. I escalated things. If Jimmy didn't reply to my texts within half an hour, I'd show up at his company. "You've changed." He was in an international meeting, taking off his headphones as he walked over to hug me, kissing me repeatedly. "Yeah, I've changed to love you more." I blushed, still complaining. "Your phone wallpaper isn't even my picture. Basically, you're saying I'm not good enough to show off." "No." He unlocked his phone and opened his photo album. It was full of my pictures. Some with rabbit ears, some with cat ears. I just glanced at them, and my face turned even redder. "Jimmy, you big pervert." He whined, "You sent them to me." I couldn't pick a suitable one for the wallpaper. I continued to pick a fight. "Didn't I tell you? You look good in a black shirt, why did you switch to this dark gray one again?" I was complaining, but my eyes were practically sparkling. It was a shame Jimmy's body wasn't modeling. His face was striking, and he had broad shoulders, a narrow waist, and incredibly long legs that you couldn't ignore. Those legs were kneeling on the bed last night. I hated myself for such dirty thoughts. "Baby?" He reached out and blocked my view, his voice laced with a soft laugh. "You're such a perv." He seemed to have misunderstood. I swear, I wasn't. Jimmy pinned me against his desk. His hands were braced on either side. It was a very intimate pose. His tone was even more suggestive. You're being too much. It makes me ruin one outfit every day. I didn't have a choice today, so I just wore this one to get by, sorry. Okay, he had his reasons. I gently patted his face. I'll forgive you this time. Move over, I want to go home. His eyes deepened. Instead of moving, he wrapped his arms around my waist. He pleaded, babe, can you go a little harder? I want it. Oh no. I'd brought out another side of Jimmy. He was shameless. Halfway through my plan, I changed my mind again. Honestly, who could resist a handsome, rich, devoted, and resilient bedmate? Due to my slackness, I didn't realize that emotional neglect had turned into cold indifference. It turned out that Jimmy was the clingy one. If I didn't reply to his messages for an hour, he'd throw a fit. The sky is vast and the wilderness is wide, I need a kiss from my wife to feel right. Wife, you've been so busy lately, you haven't had time to inspect my body. 5 minutes later, he sent several mirror selfies. All of them were shots of his abs. Which one looks better, you think? I want to post it on social media. No other meaning, not specifically for you to see, just asking for your opinion. Baby, it's changing seasons, you really shouldn't lick your lips, they'll get dry. You can lick me. I was busy packing and didn't have time to deal with him. I searched the study, afraid of missing anything of mine. I accidentally bumped a bookshelf, and a thick diary fell out. I swear, I didn't intend to snoop. I squatted down to pick it up, purposely covering my eyes. Suddenly, I saw my name on it. May 20th, Sunny. She squeezed my face and laughed so lewdly. Jessica said I followed her around all day like a timid wife. I pulled away from her hand, lowered my head, and only dared to wipe the sweat from my palms after she skipped away. Isn't being a timid wife good? I can cook, and I can do all the housework. So, Jessica definitely wouldn't lose anything by marrying me. June 1st, cloudy. Today is Children's Day. Jessica gave me a piece of candy. She wished me a happy Children's Day. I was a little happy. She gave candy to many people, but I was the first. But also a little unhappy, she treated me like a child. But I'm not little anymore, I'm 16, just 2 years younger than her. September 22nd, light rain. Today is the school anniversary. Jessica was forced to join the cheerleading squad, and she wore a really, really short skirt. All the boys around me were discussing whose legs looked the best, and Jessica's name was mentioned the most. I hated it. Not because Jessica wore a skirt, but because those guys' gazes always carried a suggestive meaning. So, I reported them to the homeroom teacher for secretly smoking. They all got calls home to their parents. Jessica ran over, she spun around, showing herself off, and asked me if she looked good. She had very light makeup on, and strawberry-flavored lip balm. I thought it must be just like the strawberry-flavored candy she gave me. Very sweet. I quickly closed the diary. I could hear my own heartbeat. Did Jimmy and I know each other before? I've always had a good personality, and I've made friends everywhere, from 5 or 6-year-olds to 50 or 60-year-olds. I could talk to anyone, even the dogs on the street. Honestly, I didn't remember anyone named Jimmy. I secretly put his crushed diary back where I found it. Jimmy had sent over 99 messages. The last one was, he let me wash the garlic. I was genuinely afraid this guy would do something stupid. I called him. He picked up immediately. Baby. Where are you? The other end was silent. I asked again, speak up, wait for me to come and play with you. In the room next to yours. Jimmy slowly opened the door. He said he had just wanted to ask me to shower together. When I didn't reply, he got mad and showered alone. I pushed him onto the couch and straddled him. I thought for a moment, there's something. He said, I agree. That quick? I asked if he really wouldn't consider it. Jimmy looked shy, playing with the bow on my dress. You've always been in charge of this house, so whatever you want to do, I agree. He was too easygoing. That put my mind at ease. Then, I pushed his fidgeting hand away and stood up. All right, Godzilla is all yours. Jimmy grabbed my hand. His eyes were clear. What do you mean? You remember everything? I nodded. Jimmy didn't say anything, just quietly buttoned up his shirt. His posture shifted from upright to casually lounging, legs crossed, an arm draped over the back of the couch. Oh. He exuded an air of aloofness, just like when we first met. Jimmy, did we know each other before? He kept a poker face, not batting an eye. Oh, was he enjoying what I was saying? I asked, exasperated, what's with the sudden cold shoulder? He said, because you said that men who smile a lot are bad luck for their wives. I actually said something that outrageous? I dropped another bombshell. You had a crush on me? He immediately squirmed. How did you know? Don't jump to conclusions. Who's spreading rumors? I'll kill them. My eyes widened. So you really did have a crush on me? I wasn't sure before, but Jimmy not denying it immediately was proof. His face instantly flushed. He stammered, where's the proof? Jessica, don't just talk nonsense because you're pretty, have long legs, and fair skin. Oh, he's flustered. He's dropped the act. I just watched him squirm. I pulled out my interrogation routine, spill it. Jimmy's legs moved faster than his ears. He instantly knelt at my feet. He argued, sorry, my body's acting on its own. I didn't mean for everyone to be so awkward. I raised an eyebrow, then why don't you get up? He shook his head, looking troubled. It says no. In bed, I gave Jimmy a good slap, and he was totally into it. He was really going for it. How many days will you be gone? I tried to push him away. He'd practically kissed every inch of my neck. I don't know. Maybe a few days, maybe a few months, maybe even a few years. Jimmy asked anxiously, so you're never coming back? I was just going on a business trip. He was acting like it was life or death. That's what we were talking about on the couch too. After my superior called, I started packing. No, I'll be back. He looked at me, his eyes drooping. Tears instantly welled up. You're just saying that because you don't want me to worry. Baby, how about we get married right now? I chuckled, annoyed, in the middle of the night. Where are you going to get married? He said, good point. Then he had another crazy idea. Then how about we have a baby? I coldly refused. I'm not having one. He nudged me with his head like a little dog. I'll give birth. I slapped him. The force was just right, enough to stun him without causing brain damage. Feeling any better? What happened to the formidable mob boss, the top dog in the business world? This is how he acts in bed? Even dogs would be disgusted. If you keep acting like this, I'll slap you to death. He wasn't intimidated at all. He covered his face, his eyes full of anticipation. Can you hit harder? He nudged me, please, babe. I quickly pulled my hand away, no more hitting. I'm really scared you'll lick my hand. After we finished messing around, I asked what was on my mind. Why do you like me? His fingers idly traced circles on my waist. Is there a reason to like someone? You're so great, it's hard for anyone not to like you, right? He complimented me so well. I was on cloud 9. I turned over and swatted away his mischievous hand. Then, can you remember how we met? He hesitated for a long time, then said, it's a long story. Then make it short. Jimmy, he thought for a moment. You helped me pick up trash once. I waited a long time, but he didn't say anything else. That's it? He hugged me tight, resting his chin on my head, and softly hummed, that's it. On the first day of my business trip, Jimmy was unusually quiet. That evening, Billy sent me a photo. In the picture, Jimmy was intently staring at his phone. When Madam's away, Boss is looking at thirst traps. Oh, Jimmy, you're something else. Just as I was about to confront him, a video popped up on my phone. Always Jessica's good dog, just a random dance, feel free to watch. In the video, he wasn't wearing a shirt. The lighting was perfect. The lean parts were lean, and the bulky parts were bulky. Everything was on full display. I replayed it 5 times. When I looked up, I covered my burning face. He really was putting in a lot of effort. On the second day of my business trip, Billy was back to snitching. Ma'am, the boss is having a lively chat in a group with a bunch of pretty women. I immediately became wary. Go, sneak a picture for me, what are they talking about? I already said earlier that it was a shame Billy was just a bodyguard, he could totally have multiple jobs, like a detective. It didn't take long before I found a safe spot and started a video call. A woman complained, "Don't even get me started, my man gets so busy he doesn't even call. If you argue with him, he just says it's all for the family. Tell me about it." That was Jimmy's voice. He took a sip of his coffee, leaning against the bar, looking relaxed. But his tone was full of resentment. He doesn't answer calls, doesn't reply to texts. Says the kid misses her, and she'll only reluctantly reply with, "Show me your abs." All the women there looked at him sympathetically. Jimmy, just bear with it. Everyone's like this. Your wife is good, at least she's not messing around outside. You should be more understanding of your wife. We, as supportive partners, need to be sensible. Jimmy sighed and put down his coffee. I'm leaving. Where are you going, Jimmy? He waved his hand, going to pick up the kid from school. His mom doesn't care, if I don't, this family will fall apart. After watching it, I just commented, is he sick? Billy surprisingly agreed, have you considered taking him to a brain doctor? Haha. My business trip was delayed by a few days. I hadn't had time to tell Jimmy. Billy then sent a message, "Ma'am, stop the abuse, the boss is about to run off with someone else. And it's a guy." I sent multiple question marks. Business trip on hold, chasing my man was more important. Just kidding. I asked Jimmy what he was doing. Will be Jessica's rebellious dog, I'm in confinement. Will be Jessica's rebellious dog, by the time you get back, the kid will be a year old. So, are you going to bring a gift? He carried on with the passive aggressiveness. I wrote a long message explaining the whole situation. He just grunted and grunted, like a pig with a hairdryer for a head. I asked about what Billy said. I heard a guy hit on you this afternoon. Jimmy slowly replied, yeah. He came right up and asked if I had a boyfriend. He's in the hospital now. I told him, Jimmy, you're making things difficult for me. Jimmy claimed innocence. I just said, close the door and beat the dog, and he fainted from fright. On the way to the hospital, he didn't buckle his seatbelt, and I braked hard, and he hit his nose on my window and broke it. When we were getting on the elevator, I didn't notice him, and his hand got caught in the door. In short, he was fine when he left, but not so fine by the time he got to the hospital. I didn't believe him. Were you doing it on purpose, or was it an accident? The innocent Jimmy said, purposely accidental. Work was done, I wasn't coming home until tomorrow. Jimmy threw another tantrum, you said you'd be back today. I felt a little apologetic, it was truly unexpected. He wouldn't let it go, I was all ready. This guy had impure thoughts. I managed to calm him down with I'll make it up to you when I get back. I checked the home security camera. I found someone holding Godzilla and issuing orders. Your mom doesn't want you anymore. You're going to lose favor, kid. The little rebel had made friends with a husky at school recently. He'd been practicing howling like a wolf all day. Not quite wolf, not quite dog, just annoying. It bothered his dad so much that he'd get up in the middle of the night and chase him with a slipper. The day I came back from my business trip, everything was as usual. Except, Jimmy had changed from his usual business attire. He was dressed very casually, pushing out a cake. The house was filled with flowers. Even Godzilla was wearing a bow tie. "Are you going to propose?" I asked calmly. He smiled faintly and nodded. "Why aren't you nervous at all?" I laughed, maybe because I figured this day would come sooner or later. Jimmy took out a ring. He knelt on one knee. There were no grand vows. He just looked at me. "Jessica, I want to marry you." "And you? Will you marry me?" Jimmy and I had our wedding on an island. It wasn't the biggest, but it was incredibly thoughtful. Everyone I loved, and everyone who loved me, was there. Jimmy leaned on my shoulder, crying, "Jessica, I've wanted to be with you since I was 16. Just try to change your mind." I laughed and comforted him. "I won't." Crybaby. Jimmy's side story: campus life. A gambling dad, a sick mom, a young him. This was truly Jimmy's background. When he was 5, his mom passed away, and Jimmy grew up to be 16 by eating whatever he could get. His school tuition was pieced together from picking up trash. He was so poor that a dollar bun had to last him 2 meals a day. Because he was hungry, he'd picked up snacks his classmates had thrown away. For $10, he once knelt before some thugs. Because of all this, he became known as the Little Beggar. That day, as usual, he wanted to try his luck at the internet cafe. There were a lot of empty soda bottles there. But the internet cafe owner chased him out every time he saw him. This time, it was more aggressive. He deliberately let out a wolf dog to bite him. His only warm cotton jacket was torn in several places. The wolf dog usually ate beef, so it was strong and powerful. He couldn't break free. In his last moments, a brick flew through the air, hitting the dog squarely on the head. A girl, with 3 or 5 companions, some carrying steel pipes, some picking up sticks, chased the dog away together. "Are you okay?" She squatted down, her eyes full of concern. Jimmy knew her. Jessica. She was from the class next door. He heard she was the prettiest, that her family was well off, and that she had tons of friends. In short, she lived a life opposite to Jimmy's. He lowered his head, not wanting Jessica to see how disheveled he was. "Jessica, let's go, it's your birthday today, don't be late," her friends urged. She turned back and said okay. Then, seeing Jimmy stand up and silently pick up the empty bottles he'd scattered along the way, she said, "See you." Jessica waved goodbye and left. After a long while, he finally dared to look up, gazing at her retreating back. Jimmy felt inexplicably sad, couldn't quite pinpoint why. He threw down the bottles he'd just picked up in frustration and sat down leaning against the wall, quietly counting the bite marks on his body. A fragrant, sweet slice of cake suddenly appeared in his sight. "It's my birthday today, have some cake." He quickly looked up. Jessica held the cake with both hands. "Your name's Jimmy, right?" She remembered his name. That day, it was the first time Jimmy had ever eaten cake. He practically devoured it, not daring to look up. Jessica didn't stand idle. She gathered all his empty bottles into a single bag. "Jimmy, you should go to my neighborhood. I'll ask those aunts and uncles to save them for you. Don't worry, I'm popular, so my word counts. Oh, and I heard you're really good at math. Can I ask you to tutor me for a semester? If I fail again, my parents will get called." The girl wouldn't stop talking. "Let me tell you about my homeroom teacher, she's so weird." The boy lowered his head, staring at the cake, his voice choked. "Okay." 16-year-old Jimmy's thoughts were simple: study, eat. He was a top student from a poor background. He'd won many math awards. But none of that solved his hunger. Jessica paid him for tutoring. He knew. She didn't lack tutors at all. So many people at school liked her. If she wanted, plenty of good students would willingly tutor her. The girl won a dance competition. She bought gifts for everyone around her. Jimmy received a brand new, warm cotton jacket. After class reassignment, they were no longer classmates in adjacent classes. He was in that building, she was in this building. The walk between them was almost 10 minutes. But Jessica would always make excuses to deliver homework, lingering around his classroom door. Open wide. He obediently opened his mouth. A sweet and sour strawberry candy. The girl then skipped back to her own class. Jimmy chewed the candy, watching her leave. No one knew what he was thinking at that moment. When she was 17, Jessica was facing her SATs. She became busy. She came less and less often. With her presence diminished, Jimmy suddenly realized something. He couldn't seem to live without Jessica anymore. When she was 18, Jessica went to college. They began their separation. Before she left, Jessica hugged him last. "Jimmy, I'll wait for you at a university." Jimmy didn't say okay, he just said, "See you." Before his SATs, Jimmy's 3 years of savings were stolen. He got into a university, but he didn't have the money to go. Afterward, he took risks in society. During those struggling years, he missed Jessica constantly. He wanted to see her. He wanted to hear her voice. He never believed in ghosts or gods. It was just that every year on his birthday, he would eat the same flavored cake. And make the same wish, "I hope I can see Jessica as soon as I open my eyes." This year, at 25, he had just finished thinking that thought. Then, he opened his eyes, and Jessica appeared. At 29, Jimmy and Jessica had a home. They were married and had a dog. He wouldn't tell Jessica about his hardships. He just needed Jessica to love him.